You won't believe how close I came to dying at the hands of my own son. If you think you know your family, if you think love and loyalty are enough to keep you safe, I beg you, stay with me until the end. Because the 3 words my husband whispered in my ear as we lay broken and bleeding at the bottom of a cliff are the only reason I'm alive to tell you the story. Before I begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Have you ever felt a chill in your heart? A moment when you realized someone you loved might not be who you thought they were? Share your story or your city below. And don't go anywhere, because what happened to us could happen to anyone, and the warning signs are easier to miss than you think. My name is Hilda, and for most of my life, I believed in the power of family. I believe that the bonds we build with our children are unbreakable, that the love we pour into them will always come back to us. My husband Henry and I spent 40 years building a life together. A life filled with laughter, Sunday dinners, and dreams of watching our grandchildren grow up. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Or so I thought. We raised 2 sons, Richard and Damien. Richard was the golden child, outgoing, generous, always the first to help. Damien was quieter, more reserved, but I loved him just as fiercely. I never played favorites, or at least I tried not to. Our home was filled with the usual chaos of family life. School projects, scraped knees, birthday parties, and the endless cycle of work and chores. Henry ran a small carpentry business, and I taught at the local elementary school. We worked hard, saved every penny, and dreamed of retiring to a little house by the sea. When Richard died in a tragic accident at 20, our world shattered. The grief nearly destroyed us, but we clung to each other and to Damien, pouring all our love into the son we had left. Damien seemed to change after Richard's death. He became more attentive, more helpful, always there when we needed him. I thought it was his way of coping, of honoring his brother's memory. I never imagined it was the beginning of something much darker. As the years passed, Henry and I grew older. We paid off the house, built up a modest nest egg, and started talking about updating our will. Damien and his wife, Melissa, visited often, always eager to help with repairs or errands. They insisted we let them handle our finances, just to make things easier. At first, I was grateful. But then the question started. Have you thought about selling the house, Mom? Damien would ask, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. It's too much for you and Dad. You could move somewhere smaller, closer to us. Melissa chimed in, her voice sweet but insistent. We just want what's best for you. You shouldn't have to worry about bills or maintenance at your age. I tried to brush off their suggestions, but the pressure grew. Damien brought over real estate brochures. Melissa made appointments with financial advisors, and suddenly, our lives felt like they were being managed by someone else. Henry seemed to trust them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The first real warning came when Damien suggested we give him power of attorney, just in case. He said it was for our protection, that it would make things easier if one of us got sick. Henry agreed, but I hesitated. I remember the stories I'd heard from friends. Stories of children taking advantage of aging parents, of homes sold out from under them, of bank accounts drained. I wanted to believe my son would never do that to us. But doubt had started to creep in. Then one afternoon, I overheard Damien and Melissa talking in the kitchen. Their voices were low, urgent, and I caught just enough to make my blood run cold. She's getting suspicious, Melissa whispered. We need to move faster. Damien replied, Don't worry. After the trip, it'll all be over. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. What trip? What would be over? I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But the fear wouldn't leave me. A few days later, Damien called with a surprise. He wanted to take us on a family hike in the mountains to celebrate our anniversary. It'll be beautiful, Mom, he said. Just the 4 of us. We'll take pictures, have a picnic, make some memories. Henry was excited, but I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to protest, to suggest we do something closer to home, but Damien insisted. Trust me, Mom. You'll love it. The night before the trip, I couldn't sleep. I packed a small bag with snacks, water, and my phone, telling myself I was being silly. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next morning, we set out early. The drive to the mountains was filled with forced laughter and small talk. Melissa snapped photos, Damien joked about the adventure, and Henry squeezed my hand, telling me how proud he was of our family. But as we started up the trail, the mood shifted. The path grew steeper, the trees denser, and Damien's jokes faded into silence. Melissa walked ahead, scouting the trail, while Damien lingered behind us, his eyes cold and calculating. When we reached the cliff, I felt a wave of dread. The view was breathtaking, but the drop was sheer and unforgiving. Damien insisted we take a family photo at the edge. As we posed, I felt his hand on my back, firm, insistent. And then, in a blur of motion, he pushed. Time seemed to slow as my body tumbled through the air. I remember the wind screaming in my ears, the flash of blue sky, the jagged rocks rushing up to meet me. I didn't have time to scream, to pray, to do anything but brace for the impact. When I hit the ground, pain exploded through my body, sharp, blinding, all-consuming. For a moment, I thought I was dead, but then I heard Henry's voice, weak but urgent, cutting through the haze of agony. "Hilda, don't move. Pretend we're dead." 3 words, spoken with the last of his strength, became my lifeline. I forced myself to lie still, to keep my eyes half closed, to slow my breathing until it was barely there. Every instinct screamed at me to cry out, to reach for Henry, but I remember the fear in his voice. I trusted him. I trusted those 3 words. Above us, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel. Damien's voice, cold and businesslike, drifted down. "They're not moving." It worked. Melissa's reply was softer, but just as chilling. "Are you sure? What if someone saw?" Damien snapped. "No one saw. We're alone. Just stick to the plan." I felt Henry's hand find mine in the dirt, his grip trembling but strong. I squeezed back, letting him know I was alive. We lay there, side by side, broken and bleeding, listening as our own son and his wife discussed how to cover up what they'd done. "We'll call for help in an hour," Melissa said. "We'll say it was an accident. They slipped. We tried to save them." Damien agreed. "We'll cry. We'll play the grieving children. No one will ever know." The betrayal was worse than the pain. My mind raced with memories. Damien as a little boy, running to me with scraped knees, laughing in the backyard, hugging me tight on his first day of school. How had that child become this stranger, this monster willing to kill for money? I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand answers, but I forced myself to stay still. Henry's words echoed in my mind. Pretend we're dead? Time lost all meaning as we lay there, waiting. I could feel blood trickling down my face, my leg throbbing with every heartbeat. I didn't know how badly I was hurt, only that I had to survive. For Henry, for the truth, for the memory of the family we once were. Eventually, I heard Damien and Melissa move away from the edge, their voices fading as they climbed back up the trail. I risked opening my eyes just a sliver, enough to see Henry's face, pale, streaked with blood, but alive. He mouthed, "Don't move," and I nodded, tears burning in my eyes. We waited, listening to the sounds of the forest, the wind in the trees, the distant call of a bird, the faint echo of our son's laughter from years ago. I wondered if anyone would find us, if we would bleed out before help arrived, if this was how our story would end. But then a miracle. I heard voices, strangers, hikers on the trail, calling out as they approached the cliff. I wanted to shout, to wave my arms, but I remembered Henry's warning. I waited, heart pounding, until I heard one of the hikers gasp. "Oh my God! There are people down there!" Within minutes, the hikers had called for help. I heard the distant wail of sirens, the rush of footsteps, the shouts of rescue workers as they scrambled down the rocks. Hands lifted me onto a stretcher, voices reassured me, and for the first time since the fall I let myself hope. As they carried us up the cliff, I caught a glimpse of Damien and Melissa standing with the rescuers, their faces masks of shock and grief. Damien rushed forward, tears streaming down his face. "Mom! Dad! Are you okay?" His performance was flawless, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes when he realized we were alive. Melissa clung to his arm, sobbing. "We tried to save them. It was an accident. They slipped. We did everything we could." The rescuers nodded sympathetically, but I saw one of them glance at us with suspicion. Maybe he noticed the way Damien's hands shook, or the way Melissa avoided my gaze. At the hospital, doctors and nurses swarmed around us, treating our injuries, asking questions. I told them everything about the hike, the fall, the voices I heard as I lay on the ground. Henry backed up my story, his voice steady despite the pain. We didn't accuse Damien and Melissa directly, not yet. We needed proof. We needed to be sure. That night, as I lay in a hospital bed, Henry squeezed my hand and whispered, "We survived, Hilda. But this isn't over. We have to be careful. They'll try again." I nodded, fear and determination warring in my chest. I knew he was right. Damien and Melissa had failed once, but they wouldn't give up easily. The money, the inheritance, the house, those things had become more important to them than family, than love, than our lives. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a silent promise. I would not let them win. I would fight for the truth, for justice, for the memory of the family I thought I had. And I would never forget the 3 words that saved my life: pretend we're dead. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft hum of the air conditioning. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every second of the fall, every word Damien and Melissa had spoken as they stood above us. My body ached, but the pain in my heart was sharper. How do you process the knowledge that your own child tried to kill you? How do you look at the face you once kissed goodnight and see a stranger staring back? Henry was in the bed beside mine, his leg in a cast, his face bruised but determined. He squeezed my hand whenever the fear threatened to overwhelm me. "We're alive, Hilda," he whispered. "That's what matters. We have a chance to make this right." The doctors came and went, checking our vitals, adjusting our medications, asking gentle questions about what had happened. I told them the truth, or as much of it as I dared. "We slipped," I said, my voice trembling. "The trail was steep. It all happened so fast." I saw the doubt in their eyes, the way they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Maybe they sensed there was more to the story. Maybe they'd seen too many accidents that weren't really accidents. Damien and Melissa visited every day, their concern a little too perfect, their grief a little too rehearsed. Damien brought flowers. Melissa brought homemade soup, and both of them hovered by our beds, asking if we needed anything, if we remembered what happened. I played along, forcing myself to smile, to thank them, to pretend I didn't see the fear flickering in Damien's eyes every time I mentioned the police. But behind the scenes, Henry and I were planning. We knew we needed evidence, something more than our word against theirs. Henry remembered that his phone, tucked in his jacket pocket, had been recording audio during the hike. If it survived the fall, it might have captured everything. The push, the conversation, the confession. It was our only hope. I asked the nurse if she could retrieve our belongings from the hospital's lost and found. She returned with a bag of muddy clothes, a shattered pair of glasses, and, miraculously, Henry's phone, battered but intact. My hands shook as I turned it on, praying the recording had survived. It had. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Damien's voice, cold and emotionless. "They're not moving." It worked. Melissa's reply, "Are you sure?" What if someone saw? "Damien, no one saw. We're alone. Just stick to the plan." My heart pounded as I listened, tears streaming down my face. This was it. This was the proof we needed. Henry and I called the police that night. Detective Johnson arrived at the hospital, his face grave as we played the recording for him. He listened in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. When the audio finished, he looked at us with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. "This is enough to open a full investigation," he said. "But you need to be careful. If Damien and Melissa suspect you're onto them, they might try something desperate." I nodded, fear and relief warring inside me. "What should we do?" "Act normal," he advised. "Let them think you're still recovering, still grateful for their help. We'll handle the rest." The next few days were a blur of police interviews, medical tests, and carefully staged conversations with Damien and Melissa. I watched them closely, searching for any sign of remorse, any flicker of the children I once knew. But all I saw was calculation, a cold determination to see their plan through. One afternoon, as Melissa sat by my bed, she leaned in close, her voice low and urgent. "You know, Hilda, accidents happen all the time in the mountains. You and Henry were lucky, but you should really think about moving somewhere safer. Maybe closer to us." I forced a smile, my heart pounding. That's a good idea, Melissa. I'll talk to Henry about it. She smiled back, but her eyes were hard. You do that. When she left, I let the mask slip, my hands shaking as I clutched the blanket. Henry squeezed my hand, his voice steady. We're almost there, Hilda. Just a little longer. The police worked quickly. They interviewed the hikers who found us, gathered evidence from the trail, and analyzed the audio recording. Detective Johnson kept us updated, his voice a lifeline in the storm. We're building a case, he assured us. But we need one more thing, a confession or an admission of guilt, something we can use in court. Henry and I agreed to wear a wire during Damien and Melissa's next visit. The thought terrified me, but I knew it was our best chance. The day of the visit, I could barely eat, my stomach twisted with anxiety. When Damien and Melissa arrived, I forced myself to act normal, to smile and thank them for their help. As we sat together, I steered the conversation toward the hike. It's strange, I said, my voice trembling. I keep replaying that day in my mind. I can't remember exactly what happened. Do you? Damien's face paled. He glanced at Melissa, who squeezed his hand under the table. It was an accident, Mom, he said, his voice flat. You slipped. We tried to help. I nodded, pretending to accept his lie. I'm just glad we're all okay. It could have been so much worse. Melissa forced a laugh. Yes, it could have. When they left, I collapsed into Henry's arms, sobbing with relief. The police had everything they needed. The next day, Detective Johnson called. We have enough. We're making arrests. As I hung up the phone, I realized the nightmare was almost over. But the scars, physical and emotional, would last a lifetime. The morning of the arrests dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I barely slept the night before, haunted by memories of Damien's childhood and the horror of what he'd become. Henry and I sat together in the hospital room, hands entwined, waiting for news. Every time footsteps echoed in the hallway, my heart leapt into my throat. Detective Johnson arrived just after breakfast, his face set with determination. It's happening now, he said quietly. We have officers at Damien and Melissa's house. They won't see it coming. I nodded, my emotions a tangled knot of relief, dread, and heartbreak. What will happen to them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They'll be charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, he replied. The evidence is overwhelming. The audio recording, the statements from the hikers, your testimony, it's all airtight. They won't be able to talk their way out of this. Henry squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with unshed tears. We did the right thing, Hilda. We had to. I nodded, but the pain was sharp. No parent ever dreams of sending their own child to jail. But what choice did we have? Damien and Melissa had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. A few hours later, Detective Johnson returned, his expression grim but satisfied. It's done. They're in custody. They didn't resist, but Damien tried to play the victim. Melissa broke down and confessed almost immediately. She admitted to planning the hike, to pushing us, to everything. I closed my eyes, letting the truth sink in. The nightmare was over, but the grief was just beginning. The news spread quickly. Friends and neighbors called, their voices full of shock and sympathy. Some offered comfort, others asked questions I couldn't answer. How could your own son do this? Did you see any signs? What will happen now? I didn't have answers. All I had was the ache of betrayal and the relief of survival. The hospital released us a week later. Henry was still on crutches, and I moved slowly, my body bruised and battered. Coming home was bittersweet. The house felt different, emptier, quieter, haunted by memories of happier times. I wandered from room to room, touching the photographs on the walls, the furniture Henry had built, the little mementos of a life we'd built together. Everything felt tainted, as if Damien's betrayal had seeped into the very walls. Eleanor, my oldest friend, came over with a casserole and a hug. She listened as I poured out the whole story, her eyes wide with disbelief and sorrow. You're so brave, Hilda, she whispered. I can't imagine what you've been through. I shook my head. I don't feel brave. I feel broken. She squeezed my hand. Broken things can be mended. You survived. That's what matters. In the days that followed, Henry and I tried to find a new normal. We leaned on each other, on Eleanor, on the small circle of friends who stood by us. We met with lawyers, gave statements to the police, and started the long process of healing. The community rallied around us, bringing meals, sending cards, offering support. But there were whispers, too, rumors and gossip, people speculating about what had really happened. I tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the people who mattered. The hardest part was facing the truth about Damien. I replayed his childhood in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed. Was there a moment when he changed? Was there something I could have done differently? The guilt was a heavy burden, but Henry reminded me, again and again, that we had done our best. We loved him, Hilda. We gave him everything. His choices are his own. The trial date was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, Henry and I focused on recovery. We went to physical therapy, attended counseling sessions, and spent long evenings talking about the future. For the first time in years, we allowed ourselves to dream again, of traveling, of spending time with our grandchildren, of finding peace. But the wounds ran deep. Some nights, I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced I heard Damien's voice in the hallway. Other times, I caught myself setting the table for 3, forgetting for a moment that our family would never be whole again. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden, Eleanor joined me with 2 cups of tea. "You know," she said softly, "you're not alone. There are other parents who've been betrayed by their children. It's not your fault." I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. I just wish I understood why. She hugged me, her arms warm and strong. Sometimes there is no why. Sometimes people lose their way. But you didn't. You survived. You fought back. That's what matters. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I realized she was right. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't fix Damien. But I could choose how I moved forward. And as I looked at Henry, sitting beside me in the fading light, I knew we would face whatever came next together. The weeks leading up to the trial were a strange mix of dread and relief. Henry and I spent our days preparing with our lawyer, reviewing the evidence, and practicing our testimony. Each night, I lay awake, haunted by memories of Damien as a child, his laughter, his hugs, the way he used to beg for one more bedtime story. How had that little boy become the man who tried to end our lives? The community's reaction was a storm of whispers and stares. Some neighbors brought casseroles and flowers, offering quiet support. Others avoided us, their eyes full of questions they were too polite or too afraid to ask. I heard rumors at the grocery store, saw the headlines in the local paper. Parents survive murder plot by son. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's nightmare. Henry tried to keep my spirits up. He made jokes about our celebrity status, but I could see the pain in his eyes. He missed Damien, even after everything. "He's still our son," he said one night, his voice breaking. "But I don't know who he is anymore." I nodded, understanding all too well. The grief was complicated, a tangled knot of love, anger, and loss. I missed the son I thought I had, the family I thought we were. But I also knew we had to see this through. For Richard, for ourselves, for the truth. Our lawyer, Mr. Harris, was a steady presence. He guided us through every step, reminding us to focus on the facts, not the emotions. "The jury needs to see you as survivors, not victims," he said. "You fought back. You saved yourselves. That's your strength." The day of the trial arrived with a chill in the air. Henry and I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made us feel strong. Eleanor drove us to the courthouse, her hand warm on my shoulder. "You're not alone," she whispered. "We're all here for you." Inside the courtroom, Damien sat at the defense table, his face pale and drawn. Melissa was beside him, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. But then I remembered the cliff, the push, the cold calculation in their voices. Any pity I felt was quickly replaced by resolve. The prosecution laid out the case with precision. They played the audio recording for the jury, Damien's voice echoing through the silent room. "They're not moving." It worked. Melissa's confession followed, her words trembling but clear. The hikers who found us testified, describing the scene, the injuries, the fear in our eyes. When it was my turn to testify, I stood tall, my hands steady. I told the truth about the hike, the fall, the voices I heard as I lay on the ground. I spoke of the years of love and sacrifice, the shock of betrayal, the pain of realizing my own child wanted me gone. Henry followed, his testimony calm and unwavering. Together, we painted a picture of a family torn apart by greed and deception. The defense tried to twist the story, painting Damien and Melissa as overwhelmed, desperate, pushed to the edge by financial stress. They claimed it was an accident, a tragic misunderstanding. But the evidence was too strong, the lies too obvious. The trial lasted a week. Each day, I watched Damien, searching for any sign of remorse. But his eyes were cold, his jaw set. Melissa wept, but I couldn't tell if her tears were for us or for herself. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom was silent. The jury found Damien and Melissa guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. The judge's words were final. You are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I felt a wave of relief, followed by a crushing sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost was almost unbearable. My son was gone, not to death, but to his own choices. The family I had spent a lifetime building was broken beyond repair. After the trial, friends and neighbors gathered at our home. Eleanor brought wine, and we toasted to survival, to truth, to the strength it takes to keep going when your world falls apart. You didn't just survive, Hilda, she whispered. You reclaimed your life. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. I thought of Richard, of the family we once were, of the dreams we had for our children. I grieved for what was lost, but I also felt a strange sense of peace. We had faced the unthinkable and survived. We had chosen truth over silence, dignity over fear. As I closed my eyes, Henry's hand found mine. We're still here, Hilda, he said softly. We still have each other. And in that moment, I knew we would find a way to move forward together. The weeks after the trial were a blur of exhaustion and quiet healing. Henry and I tried to settle back into our routines, but nothing felt quite the same. The house was too quiet, the phone rang less often, and the empty chair at the dinner table was a constant reminder of all we had lost. Sometimes, I would catch Henry staring out the window, lost in thought, and I knew he was thinking of Damien, not the man who tried to kill us, but the little boy he once was. I spent my days tending the garden, finding solace in the rhythm of planting and pruning. The earth was steady, reliable, and every new bloom felt like a small victory over the darkness that had threatened to swallow us whole. Eleanor visited often, bringing laughter and stories, reminding me that life could still be sweet. You're stronger than you know, Hilda, she would say, squeezing my hand. You survived the unimaginable. Now it's time to live again. But healing was not a straight line. Some nights, I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced I heard footsteps in the hallway. Other times, I found myself replaying the trial in my mind, the sound of Damien's voice, the look in his eyes as the verdict was read. I wondered if he ever thought of us, if he felt any regret, or if he was simply angry that his plan had failed. The community's support was a balm, but it also brought its own challenges. People stopped me in the grocery store, at church, in the post office, offering sympathy and asking questions. Some were kind, others curious, a few even judgmental. How could your own son do such a thing? They would whisper, as if I held the answer to a question as old as time. I didn't have answers. All I had was the truth. Love is not a guarantee against betrayal. Sometimes, the people you give everything to are the ones who hurt you the most. Henry and I started attending a support group for parents who had lost children, not to death, but to choices, to addiction, to estrangement. The stories we heard were heartbreaking, but they made us feel less alone. We shared our own story, and in the telling, found a measure of peace. You did what you had to do, one woman told me, her eyes shining with understanding. You chose your life. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Slowly, we began to rebuild. We took short trips to the lake, visited old friends, and even started planning a vacation, something we hadn't done in years. The world felt bigger, brighter, full of possibilities we had forgotten existed. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Eleanor, she asked, "Do you ever think about forgiving him?" I was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for loving him anyway, for surviving." She nodded, her eyes kind. "That's enough, Hilda. Sometimes, Forgiveness is just letting go of the hope that the past could have been different. That night, I wrote in my journal, pouring out the pain and the hope, the anger and the gratitude. I wrote about the 3 words that saved my life, about the strength I found in Henry, about the friends who stood by us when everything else fell apart. I wrote about the future, not as something to fear, but as something to embrace. The seasons changed, and with them, so did we. The wounds on my body faded, replaced by scars that told a story of survival. The wounds in my heart took longer, but even they began to heal. I found joy in small things, a cup of tea on a rainy morning, the scent of fresh flowers, the sound of Henry's laughter as we watched an old movie. We started volunteering at the community center, helping other seniors navigate the challenges of aging. We shared our story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to resilience. "You're not alone," I would tell them. "No matter how dark it gets, there is always a way forward." One evening, as Henry and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "We made it, Hilda. We survived." I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle deep in my bones. Yes, we did, and we're going to keep living. For Richard, for ourselves, for the life we still have. As the stars appeared in the sky, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was more than a victim. I was a survivor. And with Henry by my side, I knew we could face whatever came next. But even as I embraced the future, I knew the scars of betrayal would never fully fade. They were a reminder of the price of love, of the strength it takes to choose yourself, even when it means letting go of the people you love most. As spring turned to summer, Henry and I found ourselves slowly reclaiming the life we thought we'd lost. The garden flourished, the house felt lighter, and laughter, real, unforced laughter, began to return. But the shadow of Damien's betrayal lingered, a quiet ache that surfaced in unexpected moments. A song on the radio, a family photo, the echo of a memory that now felt tainted. We kept busy, filling our days with small joys and new routines. Henry took up woodworking again, his hands steady as he crafted birdhouses and benches for the neighbors. I started painting, letting color and light pour onto the canvas, each brushstroke a small act of healing. Eleanor remained a constant presence, her friendship a lifeline. She encouraged me to share my story, to help others who might be suffering in silence. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at the community center. The room was filled with faces both familiar and new, women and men who had survived their own storms, who carried their own scars. I stood at the front, my hands trembling, and told them about the 3 words that saved my life. I spoke of love and loss, of betrayal and survival, of the strength it takes to choose yourself when the world expects you to keep giving. Afterward, people lined up to thank me, to share their own stories. One woman, her eyes brimming with tears, hugged me tightly. "You gave me hope," she whispered. "I thought I was alone." In that moment, I realized that my pain had a purpose. By speaking my truth, I could help others find theirs. Henry and I grew closer than ever. The ordeal had stripped away all pretense, leaving only the raw, honest love that had carried us through decades of hardship. We talked openly about our fears, our regrets, our dreams for the future. We grieved for Damien, but we also celebrated the family we still had, the friends who stood by us, the memories of Richard, the life we had built together. Our children's absence was a wound that never fully healed. Sometimes, I would catch Henry staring at the phone, hoping for a call that never came. I missed Damien, despite everything. I missed the boy he once was, the son I thought I knew. But I refused to let that longing define me. I had learned, painfully, that love without respect is not love at all. The community continued to rally around us. Neighbors brought fresh vegetables from their gardens. Friends invited us to dinners and outings, and the support group I had joined became a second family. We laughed, we cried, we shared our victories and setbacks. Together, we learned that survival is not just about enduring pain, it's about finding meaning in it. One evening, as Henry and I sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance, he turned to me and said, "Do you ever regret it, Hilda? Telling the truth, going to the police, letting the world see what happened?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "No, I regret what Damien did. I regret the pain. But I don't regret choosing us. I don't regret surviving." He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Me neither." As the days passed, I found myself looking forward more than back. I planned a trip to the coast, something Henry and I had always dreamed of but never dared to do. We packed a picnic, loaded the car, and drove for hours, the windows down, the wind in our hair. We walked along the beach, letting the waves wash over our feet, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. That night, as we watched the sun set over the ocean, Henry took my hand and whispered, "Pretend we're dead." I laughed, the sound bright and unburdened. "Not anymore," I replied. "Now we live." The journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, days when the weight of loss threatened to pull me under. But each time, I remember the 3 words that saved my life, not just in that moment on the cliff, but every day since. Pretend we're dead. It was a command to survive, to endure, to outlast the darkness. But now, it was a reminder to live, to embrace the light, to choose myself. As summer faded into fall, I stood in the garden, surrounded by the beauty Henry and I had created. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was more than a victim. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, the people you love most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But that doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you learn to love yourself, too. And as I watched the leaves drift to the ground, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I will never let anyone make me feel small again. I will protect my heart, my home, and my happiness, no matter what. The first anniversary of that terrible day arrived with a strange sense of calm. Henry and I spent the morning in the garden, planting new bulbs where the earth had been left bare. Each shovelful of soil felt like a small act of hope, a promise that life could bloom again even after the harshest winter. That evening, Eleanor and a few close friends came over for dinner. We ate, we laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of true belonging. After dessert, Eleanor raised her glass and said, "To Hilda and Henry, proof that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that courage is sometimes just 3 words whispered in the dark." Her words made me smile, but they also brought tears to my eyes. I realized that survival isn't just about escaping death, it's about choosing to live, to love, and to trust again, even when your heart is still mending. Later, as the house grew quiet, I sat on the porch with Henry, watching the stars blink into existence. The air was cool, the world peaceful. I thought about everything we had lost, but also everything we had found: strength, resilience, and a new kind of freedom. I thought about Damien, not with anger, but with a bittersweet ache. I would always love the boy he once was, but I had finally let go of the man he became. I opened my journal and wrote a letter to myself, a letter I wish I could send to every parent who has ever been betrayed by their own child. You are not weak for loving. You are not foolish for hoping. You are not alone in your pain. The world may not understand, but your story matters. Your survival is a victory, even if it doesn't feel like one yet. As the days turned into weeks, Henry and I found new ways to fill our lives. We traveled to the coast again, walked hand in hand along the shore, and let the salt air wash away the last traces of fear. We volunteered at the community center, helping others who had lost their way. We learned to laugh again, to dream again, to believe that happiness was still possible. Sometimes, I would catch Henry looking at me with a soft smile, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. We made it. We survived. And now we live. The pain of Damien's betrayal would never fully disappear, but it no longer controlled us. We had reclaimed our story, our home, our future. We had learned that love is not about blind loyalty, but about respect, honesty, and the courage to walk away when those things are gone. And now, I want to ask you, the one listening to my story, what would you do if the person you loved most became your greatest danger? Would you have the strength to fight for yourself, to choose survival over silence? I want to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments. If my story moved you, please like this video. It helps more people find hope when they need it most. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories of betrayal, survival, and the power of choosing yourself. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You might just give them the courage to whisper their own 3 words. I will live. With all my heart, thank you for listening. Until next time.